Hi everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have a book haul. Indeed, I believe that I'm actually wearing the same outfit that I wore in my last book haul, and if this is what our book hauling outfit looks like, it could be worse. A certain festive time of year happened and I asked my parents for a few books. I kept it very minimal this year for the reason that I guessed that the Waterstones sale would be happening, and I decided that I would wait for the sale before acquiring books that I'd been waiting for throughout the year. Firstly, prior to Christmas, I went out with work and one of my volunteers went to the lavatory, and it turned out that they had books in the ladies' loos for people to acquire, only my volunteer misunderstood that and thought they were just to take, so she nicked me a copy of An Academic Question by Barbara Pym. We'd been having this conversation before this about how I have been meaning to read Barbara Pym for years, partly influenced by Shaun the Book Maniac and other folks around these parts who have enjoyed the work of this writer. But I was going to wait until I'd read all of the Elizabeth Taylor before I started on Barbara Pym as well. Shall we find out what it's about together? In a provincial university town, Carrow Grimstone, fantastic name, a dissatisfied faculty wife becomes the unwilling accomplice to her husband Alan's ambitions. When she volunteers to read to a blind esteemed anthropologist in a nursing home, Alan seizes the opportunity to steal his papers, research that could both advance his reputation while refuting the findings of a respected colleague. A delightful comedy of manners with a touch of mystery, An Academic Question is prime Barbara Pym territory. Actually, this sounds like a good read for me, considering two books I've got planned for the future. It might work as good inspiration craft-wise. I'm going to show you the books that I asked for of my parents before showing you what my father got for me as a joke. So one book that I asked for was My Soul Twin by Nino Haratschvili, and this was translated by Charlotte Collins, who was one of the translators of The Eighth Life. The Eighth Life fast became one of my favourite books when I read it, I believe, 2 years ago. And this one here was originally published in 2011, but was only translated into English last year. Here we have two families, one devastating secret, and an epic story of forbidden love. Once again, let's just read the blurb together. 8 years have passed since Stella last saw Ivo, but when he returns, the reunion of their unconventional family will change the course of her ordinary life. As children, Stella and Ivo grew close as their parents embarked on an affair that would shatter both families. Later, as teenagers, their own relationship would be the cause of further scandal. Now, as adults, they set out on an odyssey to uncover the truth about another family's past and to understand their own. If it's anything like The Eighth Life, then it's gonna be a pacey read with some fantastic prose. Use that word a lot. I need to change that. I need to find a word that actually means something when it comes to writing. But it's also considerably shorter than those books, and myself, Charlie Brooke, Sarah of Hardcover Hearts, and Leo of Leo's Little Book Life are planning a buddy read of this at some point in 2023. Story behind this book though. So I only ordered books that I knew that my parents would be able to get from my local Waterstones due to... I've seen something. I should have started with that. I completely forgot about this. So I'll talk about this momentarily. I acquired the illustrated editions of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, because originally I was going to ask my parents to get me a copy of The Fellowship of the Ring, and then each year go to another copy of a book from The Lord of the Rings, simply because I started rereading this last year, in 2021, and found that I was actually more immersed in the book as an adult than I had been as a teenager. When I saw that this set was on sale, I asked my mum whether I could buy it and have her and my father give me the money and just call that my Christmas gift. My father, who doesn't read, when I told him about this, went, well, I won't get to go into Waterstones now and look for books. And so immediately I was like, well, I've got to give them a list. and they weren't able to get a few of the books on there. But when they went in and asked for My Soul Twin, which I had seen they had on their shelves, they were told that, one, they didn't have the book, and two, that the bookseller had never heard of the author. So, I was due to meet a friend for lunch 2 days later. I took my parents back, walked right over to the shelf, took it off the shelf and handed it to my parents to go and buy, and then went off for lunch. Because it was there. Fools. The next book that my parents acquired for me is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is the 42nd anniversary edition, and this is the first book in the trilogy of 5. I'm currently 78 pages into it, and it is a science fiction fantasy that a lot of people have read. A lot of people believe that I would have read by now and are shocked that I have not. But I watched the film with Martin Freeman towards the middle of December, just on a whim. I just saw that it was online. I was like, oh, I'll watch this. And it turned out to be just my sort of thing. And the book is proving to be quite the same. And I'm hoping that I continue to really enjoy this, because I've seen that the entire radio series has been remastered and is available to listen to on Audible. And, either way, classic science fiction fantasy that loads of people already adore. And I'm looking forward to reading it. And then we have the joke present of my parents, well, specifically my father, and that is Edmond Elephant, a Peppa Pig book. And I don't even know if there is an author to this book. It says Peppa and Friends on the back. George loves playing with his friend Edmond Elephant. Edmond is very clever and knows lots of things. My father has always said he was going to buy me a Ladybird book, and so he found this one. And then my friend Joy, who I was meeting on the day that I found my soul twin, gifted me a copy of Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout. The story behind this is that Joy went down to the Reading Festival to see Elizabeth Strout, only for Elizabeth Strout to have had an injury, meaning that she couldn't be there, but Joy still managed to get her hands on 2 of the signed copies, because she'd signed copies beforehand and sent them on to the local Waterstones there, and Joy was kind enough to grab me one. So that was very kind. I have already read this, and you'll be getting to hear about it in my next wrap-up. But Lucy by the Sea is set during the pandemic at the beginning of 2020, and William, who is Lucy's ex-husband, contacts her because he is a scientist and he can see what's happening. So he wants her to go with him to Maine so that they can social distance correctly. And this book follows their lives as they deal with the new normal that the pandemic brought. It also sees them re-evaluating their lives and assessing their relationship and where things might have gone wrong in the past. Sorry if you can hear any of my family in the background. My brother has started working nights, which has meant that the only time I could find to record was 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening. Let's move on to some books, what I bought. I acquired a copy of A Tidy Ending by Joanna Cannon. Don't have a finished copy of this, only have the proof from earlier in the year, so I thought it time to rectify that. Nearly made it into my top 10. And Charlie of Charlie Brooke is still talking about the book that this had to fight against. Then we have one of the other books that I've actually already read from this haul, and that is The Tale of Toxic Positivity, a parody by Paul Mars and Beatrix Pottimmel. So Paul Mars, I first knew as a writer of Doctor Who stories, and then I read his Brenda and Effie series, which is basically The Bride of Frankenstein opens a B&B in Whitby, and I only ever read the first 2 of that. I might rectify that in future. This is a parody of the characters of Beatrix Potter and takes certain things about positivity, and yeah, it looks at toxic positivity. It has the characters swearing in ways you wouldn't imagine them to swear, a bit sexed up, a bit naughty. It had me chuckling. Then I got The Passenger and Stella Maris by Cormac McCarthy. Something I don't think that Waterstones thought about when they reduced these books is that you could buy each of these separately for £20 the pair, or you could buy a box set for 25. That math just doesn't work for me, because who needs a useless cardboard box? I actually can't remember what these books are about. It has been a very long time since I read Cormac McCarthy. Indeed, 2 years ago, I acquired a copy of Blood Meridian with the intention of reading that year, because I wanted to read the back catalogues of writers who I might have read one or a few of their books and enjoyed but never revisited. And I decided to do that with Cormac McCarthy, and then never got around to actually reading Blood Meridian because other things got in the way, namely work. In terms of these books, I've heard that Stella Maris acts as some sort of coda to the passenger, and 1980, past Christian, Mississippi. It is 3 a.m. when Bobby Weston zips the jacket of his wetsuit and plunges from the boat deck into darkness. His dive light illuminates the sunken jet, 9 bodies still buckled in their seats, hair floating, eyes devoid of speculation. Missing from the crash site are the pilot's flight bag, the plane's black box, and the 10th passenger. But how? A collateral witness to machinations that can only bring him harm, Weston is shadowed in body and spirit by men with badges, by the ghost of his father, inventor of the bomb that melted glass and flesh in Hiroshima, and by his sister, the love and the ruin of his soul. That Alicia Weston, 20 years old in 1972, with $40,000 in a plastic bag, admits herself to the hospital. A doctoral candidate in mathematics at the University of Chicago, Alicia has been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and she does not want to talk about her brother Bobby. Instead, she contemplates the nature of madness, the human insistence on one common experience of the world. She recalls a childhood where, by the age of 7, her own grandmother feared for her. She surveys the intersection of physics and philosophy, and she introduces her cohorts, her chimeras, the hallucinations that only she can see. All the while, she grieves for Bobby, not quite dead, not quite hers. Told entirely through the transcripts of Alicia's psychiatric sessions, Stella Maris is a searching, rigorous, intellectually challenging coda to the passenger, a philosophical inquiry that questions our notions of God, truth, and existence. That's one of the things this year. I'm really hoping to read some more of the books on my shelves, as opposed to like going out and people are talking about reading by whim more. I did read a lot of prize fiction last year, and that still frustrates me that I missed out on all the books I wanted to read. Then I heard Cat Lady by Donna Porter. I heard the author talking about this book on BBC Radio 2. She might have been chatting with Claudia Winkleman. I can't remember. Single, independent, crazy, aloof, on the shelf, lives alone. That's the description for Cat Lady. It's safer for Mia to play the part that people expect. She's a good wife to her husband, a doting stepmother. She slips on her suit for work each morning like a new skin. But beneath the surface, there's another woman just clawing to get out. When a shocking event shatters the conventional life she's been so careful to build, Mia is faced with a choice. Does she live for a society that's all too quick to judge, or does she live for herself? And if that's as an independent woman with a cat, then the world better get ready. So, as I say, I heard the author on the radio, and this sounded like it might be humorous. So I got it. Next, I got Maureen, Fry and the Angel of the North by Rachel Joyce. This is a sequel to the unlikely pilgrimage of Harold Fry and the love songs. No, it wasn't the love songs, was it? Did she have love songs too? She bloody did. The love songs of Miss Queenie Hennessy. 2 books that I listened to as audiobooks as opposed to reading. And part of me wishes that I'd listened to this book as well, but I still like Rachel Joyce as a writer, and in this book, Maureen is going on her own pilgrimage for similar, and she's having a similar sort of experience that Harold did, but she's a completely different person, and so it's different to see her journey, and it's interesting to see her journey and then compare it to Harold's. And Rachel Joyce just manages to get characters perfectly well, and whenever I read her I can tell that she once wrote for radio, because she just pins her characters just brilliantly. She really knows how to examine and craft a fully fledged human. Next we have You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaeke Emezi, and I believe that this is the author's love story. Faye is about to be given the chance to escape the city's blistering heat for a dream island holiday. Poolside cocktails, beach sunsets and elaborate meals. And as the sun goes down on her old life, our heroine also might just be ready to open her heart to someone new. The only problem is she's falling for the one man she absolutely can't have. I don't know. I've enjoyed this author's work before, and that is why I acquired this book, plus a few readers I trust also enjoyed this book, and I'm hoping that I will have a similar experience. Next, we have Wild by Amy Jeffs, Tales from Early Medieval Britain. I've yet to read Storyland by Amy Jeffs, but I saw this and wanted it, and actually it's considerably shorter than the other one, so I might even read this first. That's all it takes to get me to read a book nowadays. Are you short? Because I ain't got a lot of time, says the person who wrote the longest book of his career last year. Well, I released it. I've not written anything in a very long time. Then we have Vagabonds by Eloghosa Osunde, which kind of followed me throughout 2022. I discovered its existence and knew that I wanted to read it when I read the sample that was there for me to read. Then I kept seeing it and never acquiring it. The Spirit of Lagos begins telling the story, and I read that, and I liked this voice at the beginning of it. And I don't really know much more about the novel. It's just one that has started to intrigue me for, you know, when you see them everywhere, but you don't hear people talking about them, but also it's the case of it really sounds like something you're going to like. I can't explain it. We meet the people who live in the shadows. Among them, a driver for a debauched politician with the power to command life and death, a lesbian couple whose tender relationship sheds unexpected light on their experience with underground sex work, a mother who attends a secret spiritual gathering that shifts her reality. As their lives begin to intertwine, the vagabonds are seized by the spirits who command the city. A force is drawing them together, but for what purpose? There is something about that book. Now, I absolutely had no idea about this book's existence until I saw it on the website, and that is The Furrows by Namwali Serpell. I read The Old Drift a few years ago, and apart from a few issues towards the end and the way that book ended, I enjoyed it for the most part. It reminded me of David Mitchell, and the telling of it was exceptionally good, where it had this mixture of the mystical and the sci-fi and these characters that could have your heart, if I had a heart. So shall we find out what happens in this one? Cassandra Williams is 12. Her little brother is 7. One day, when they're alone together, there's an accident and Wayne is lost forever. Though his body is never recovered, their mother can't stop searching. The missing boy cleaves the family with doubt. How do you grieve an absence, and how does it feel? As C grows older, she relives and retells her story, and she sees her brother everywhere. In cafes, aeroplane aisles, subway cars. Here is her brother's older face, the light in his eyes, his lanky limbs, the way he seems to recognise her too. But it can't be, of course. Or can it? And then one day there's another accident, and C meets a man both mysterious and familiar, a man who's also searching for someone, as well as his own place in the world. His name is Wayne. We'll see. Like I say, I did not know that this book existed, but as soon as I saw the author's name, I put it into my cart and had it sent my way. Then we have Remainders of the Day by Shaun Bythell, another book I didn't know existed, but I have read The Diary of a Bookseller and Confessions of a Bookseller by this author. They are diaries about him and the bookshop in which he works. I really enjoy them. I can't say fairer than that. I think that they are just grand book lovers' books, and as somebody who works in retail, I always read these books, and whenever I read a Shaun Bythell book, I'm like, I should write something like this about the charity shop. I should give them my diaries about working at a flaming charity shop. And, do you know, if I'd done it by now, I've been at that charity shop I've been where I am for 8 years this year. I've worked for the charity for 10 years this year. I'd have had a lot of diaries by now. Then we have Molly and the Captain by Anthony Quinn. And again, this is a book where I just like the author. So I now have 2 books by this author that I haven't read, and I've bought them simply on the strength of the other books by him that I've liked. This one is entirely different than those, but we have a celebrated artist of the Georgian era painting his 2 young daughters, and the portrait is known as Molly and the Captain, and it becomes instantly famous. And then, in the summer of 1889, a young man sits painting a line of elms in Kensington Gardens. One day he glimpses a mother at play with her 2 daughters and decides to include them in his picture. From that moment, he is haunted by dreams and seem to foreshadow his doom. Then a century later in Kentish Town, a painter and her grown-up daughters receive news of an ancestor linking them to the long-vanished double portrait of Molly and the Captain. Meanwhile, a friendship with a young musician stirs unexpected passions and threatens to tear the family apart. I've liked Anthony Quinn's books in the past and I found them incredibly readable. And then today, it was our first day back at the writers group, and one of the writers there decided that he wanted to gift me his 2 latest poetry collections. So one of those is Blah Blah Black Sheep by Phil Poyser, which is a collection of poems set at his allotment. And way back when, I began helping this poet put together the collection Lifelines, and I helped create this cover with some royalty-free images, and then I just ran out of time in which to help him. And so he got his daughter involved and he brought out this very well done collection, and it looks very professional, and I'd be interested to find out where he had them printed because they've clearly not been done by KDP. Phil writes a lot of comic poetry based on his experiences or things that he's seen, and these are likely to be no different than that. Also, if you buy any of Phil's books, he doesn't save any of the profits for himself. He donates it all to Prostate Cancer UK. So, there we go. Them's the books.
But wait! There's more!
It's a few days later, and once I finished recording that video the other day, I remembered that I'd forgotten one book. Kieran of KD Books has a, well, is it a book club? It's a Discord server. I don't know, I don't understand technology. But as part of that, Plek, there was a Secret Santa. And I sent some books off, and I hadn't received something in time to see what everybody else got, this exchange, but it was great to watch and see what we were all getting. And a few days down the line, I received translations by Brian Friel, which is a play set in August 1833 at a hedge school in the townland of Bythell. I don't know Irish, I'm sorry. An Irish-speaking community in County Donegal. In a nearby field camps a recently arrived detachment of the Royal Engineers making the first Ordnance Survey. For the purposes of cartography, the local Gaelic place names have to be recorded and rendered into English. In examining the effects of this operation on the lives of a small group, Brian Friel skillfully reveals the far-reaching personal and cultural effects of an action which is at first sight purely administrative. It says this is an A-level text. Anyway, it's been a while since I read a play. I don't know who sent this to me, but when I read the blurb, I'm reminded of an aspect of whatever that book was that was longlisted and shortlisted for the book of last year, and I had this whole thing over. That was Irish too. I'll see if I can find a picture. I can't remember the title right now. And the language aspect reminds me of that. A few people have actually contacted me and told me that they very much enjoyed this and they think that I'm going to as well. And I am hoping to read it sooner rather than later. A few years back, when I still wrote radio plays, well, I still intend to write more radio plays in the future. It's just at the moment, my focus is entirely on novels. But I would regularly get asked when I was going to turn Doris into a stage play, and there was a portion of a Doris tale turned into a stage play that will never see the light of the day. It was a definitive end for the Doris series, was that bit of a play I wrote. But I have a friend who used to love to write a play because she said she could get one done in an afternoon. Actually, to be fair, she did write she's still writing some very stellar plays indeed. But I do love a play. I've not seen one in a while. I've not been to the theatre in at least a year now. And even then it was to see Fascinating Aida. Fantastic. Fantastic. You all ought to be watching Fascinating Aida if you aren't already. So, Friday was my first day back at work since Christmas. This was the first time that I'd had the period between Christmas and New Year off in a long while, and I won't be having it this year because my manager's going to take it this year. I think it's fairer that way, let everyone get a go. But we'll see when we get there. But I donated an entire Bag for Life full of books. There must have been at least 20 to 30 in there. And I thought, right, I do it every year. I unhaul books. I remove ones that I don't think that I'm going to read. I take stock of them, look at them, think if I'm going to reread them again, remove some of the ones that I didn't particularly like. And I only went and found another 4 flipping books. The first being Child of God by Cormac McCarthy. This is a taut, chilling novel that plumbs the depths of human degradation. I didn't say that word properly. Lester Ballard, a violent, solitary and introverted young backwoodsman dispossessed on his ancestral land, is released from jail and allowed to haunt the hill country of East Tennessee, preying on the population with his strange lusts. McCarthy transforms commonplace brushes with humanity in homestead stores and in the woods into stunning scenes of the comic and the grotesque, and as the story hurtles toward its unforgettable conclusion, depicts the most sordid aspects of life with dignity, humour and characteristic brilliance. Because of the shininess of this cover, it's currently covered in finger marks, but I don't mind because it was cheap. But I'm hoping that this gives me the sensation that McCarthy's writing gave me in No Country for Old Men, because All the Pretty Horses and The Crossing were 2 books that reminded me of the westerns that my father would watch when I was younger. I mean, he still watches them now. But The Crossing also very much reminded me of White Fang. The book, the film, not the book. I've never read the book. Couldn't get past that. But maybe as an older person, because I was reading them about 10 or 11 years ago, my opinion might have changed. Either way, looking forward to that. Next, we have Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangaranga. And I know that this author had a book up for some prize a few years ago. And when I Googled it, I found out that this was the first in the trilogy, hopefully. It was released in 1988, and this edition was published in 2004. And it says on the back that Nervous Conditions brings to the politics of decolonisation theory the energy of women's rights. By now a classic in African literature and black women's literature internationally, Nervous Conditions is a must for anyone wanting to understand voice, memory and coming of age for young black women in Africa. My goodness, there are a lot of words on a page when it comes to this book. I already know that I'm not going to be reading the introduction because introductions have ruined things for me in the past. I'm hoping to enjoy it. Well, no, enjoy is perhaps the wrong word. I'm hoping to appreciate it on a craft level and a story level and a character level. I'm hoping that it brings me all of the things that I like to see well done in literature. Next, we have God's Own Country by Ross Raisin. I have a book by Ross Raisin from years ago on me Kindle. I had an e-arc. I still haven't read it. Maybe that's something we need to look at this year. Lugger Buggers, Bomb Pots and Blatherskites. In Sam Marsdyke's mind, there isn't a person left in the valley who hasn't turned against him. And really, it was just the fact that this is set on the Yorkshire moors, people on a farm, and is brilliantly comic and darkly terrifying. I'm in Cheshire, but I do like stories that might be somewhat agricultural. And on the front it says that we have a disturbed but basically well-intentioned rural youngster turns into a malevolent sociopath. And this feels as though it could be the tale of my younger brother, so we will see. And then the final book that I got from the charity shop was Flesh and Blood by Michael Cunningham. And I got this because I was hoping that this is the same Michael Cunningham who wrote The Hours. And I have been meaning to read more by this author for many, many years. Following the Stasos family through 4 generations as it is transformed by ambition, love, violence, and accumulating history, Constantine Stasos, or Stasos, I don't know, a Greek immigrant, marries Mary Cuccio, an Italian-American girl, and they have 3 children, each fated to a complex life. Susan is oppressed by her beauty and her father's affections. Billy is brilliant and gay. Zoe is a wild, heedless visionary. As the years pass, their lives unfold in ways that compel them and their parents to meet ever greater challenges. Zoe raises a child in New York with a transvestite friend, Billy searches for love and battles with his father, and Susan raises a son conceived in secret whose explosive emotions bring the book to its climax. Well, do you know what? We love a family drama over here, so I'm actually looking forward to it more than I thought, even if we have got a ceramic horse on the front missing a foot. I think it must be an American cover, because that ain't making no sense to me. Then I got home on Friday to find a few parcels for me. The first was a book that I bought and had forgotten about, and that is Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. I've said for years about Furiously Happy being a book that got me through an exceptionally sad period in my life. And I didn't know that Jenny Lawson had written anything new. This book is either 1 or 2 years old, let's see. I didn't know about it, but when I found out about it, I went to eBay and I acquired the hardcover because I found that the UK paperbacks are a bit stiff to get open, and then not my most enjoyable way of consuming a Jenny Lawson book, because she writes that quickly and that humorously that I need the pages to be able to move fast. So we will see what I think of this one, reading it in hopefully not as sad a place as I read Furiously Happy. The next parcel was from my good friend and fellow booktuber Charlie of Charlie Brook Reads, and I sent her a book for Christmas and she promptly told me off about that, but decided that she was going to send me a book, so she went to Wardstones and for Christmas has sent me Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. If you didn't know, I'm a big fan of Barbara Kingsolver's work. When I first read The Lacuna back in 2010, I had this experience where I completely forgot the author's note at the beginning of the book, which said that the characters were fictional, because I believed that this writer must have actually existed. Demon Copperhead, I believe, is a modern, not necessarily retelling of David Copperfield, but perhaps inspired by that. And I'm interested to see how things go. Charlie is still bemoaning the fact that I've had this book on my Kindle from NetGalley 4 months and didn't read it, and now I have this, and hopefully we're going to be buddy reading this book together, and that will probably hopefully be happening in the next month, even though that seems like it's going to completely ruin all of my numbers where I tried to speed through books in January, which I think is probably why she sent me Christmas Lights, 10 Poems for Dark Winter Nights, because I've read this already. I didn't really get Christmas lights from everything, and I didn't necessarily get Christmas from every single poem, but I definitely got winter from every single poem. I appreciated the images more than the sounds, and I think it's definitely one I'm going to go back to in December and see if the sensation of being festive has passed, and maybe that's why I was looking at these more as just like 10 poems than something festive that might be good to read at Christmas. I did like the sounds within the poem Museum of Angels. There was some nice assonance in there, and like I say, good images is something probably to go back to. And then she sent me Selected Poems of Mick Imlar. This is a book that I picked up in Crewe, and then I decided I didn't want it, so she bought, and now she sent it to me. So Charlie, you will have to let me know what your thoughts on Selected Poems by Mick Imlar was, unless of course you're just unhauling it because you decided that you didn't want it in your life anymore, that they weren't for you. We'll have to have a chat about this one. Who was Mick Imlar? He was born in 1956 and educated at Magdalen College, Oxford, where he taught as a junior fellow, editor of Poetry Review from 1983 to 86. His poetry appeared in The Zoologist's Bath, Birthmarks, Penguin New Poets, Die Hard, and The Lost Leader before the poet died in 2009. There we go. Those are officially all of the books. If you've read any of these books and think that I should prioritise any over others, then let me know which I should get to sooner rather than later. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is all.